Very much, all of you, for gathering. As you would know, and as your viewers would know, just about an hour or two ago, the National Assembly concluded its consideration of Budget 2021 and approved the budget and additionally approved all of the supportive legislation required to implement the various measures that were announced in the budget. I wanted, now that the budget is approved, I wanted to take the opportunity to say a few things, to convey a few particular messages. First of all, I wanted to place on record that the Budget 2021 comprised an amalgamation of efforts by many parties, many stakeholders in society, including, as you know, other political parties were consulted, civil society organizations were consulted, the private sector, organized labor, many other civil society organizations either were engaged in formal face-to-face consultations or indeed made suggestions and made submissions, written submissions to the government of Guyana, all of which were taken into consideration. And I think the budget was really informed by a very rich consultative process, which, no doubt contributed to it being the very strong and comprehensive policy document that it proved to be. But in addition to that, the staff of many agencies would have contributed to the preparation of the budget. Staff of the Ministry of Finance, staff of budget agencies, staff of other public sector entities would all have contributed to the preparation of the budget. And I wanted to place on record my thanks to all of those people who contributed to the preparation of the budget. I wanted also to say that, particularly as it relates to the second half of the budget process, the consideration of the national estimates, a lot of work is done by the technical staff to prepare their ministers for the scrutiny of the national estimates. As you know, that part of the budget process involves the Parliament asking questions of the ministers and scrutinizing the budget estimates in great detail. And a lot of work is typically done by the permanent secretaries, the accounting officers, the budget officers, etc., in preparing their minister for that part of the budget process. And I wanted also particularly to place on record the thanks to so many people who worked hard to prepare their ministers for consideration of the budget, for that phase of the budget process. I know that some of them are a little bit disappointed because they worked so hard to prepare their ministers for detailed scrutiny of the budget, and then that detailed scrutiny did not happen because of the actions that were taken by the opposition. I know some of the staff, said to me that they felt that they had done a lot of work to prepare to answer any question, and then, of course, the opposition chose not to ask any questions. I can understand their disappointment. I mean, like them, exactly like them, I welcome the opportunity for the budget to be interrogated in great detail, and I think it's regrettable that the opposition chose to take the path that they did, but I'm going to come back to that point in a minute. I wanted in particular to thank the clerk of the National Assembly and his staff, the speaker, the clerk, and the staff of the Parliament Office for the tremendous work that they did. Managing these proceedings, long days and long sittings requires a lot of effort. And, as they always used to do in the previous years that I was minister, they once again demonstrated their remarkable professionalism, and they exerted tremendous effort in ensuring that the sittings were executed and that the business of the people went on. So I wanted also to say thanks to them. And of course, the media, yourselves, many of you worked very long hours, wrote lots of stories on the budget. and I think it's, I think the media's work on the budget is also a very important part of, communicating with the people, communicating with the public at large about what is contained in the budget. I think that itself is an extremely important part of the budget process, and so I wanted also to say thanks to the media, and of course everybody else who worked, the police who would have provided security for the Parliament office, the support staff, and of course in today's age of live streaming, I was really surprised at how many thousands of people tuned in to watch the budget. And I wanted to say to them that they are an important part of the process too, because we're speaking to when you're speaking live, when you're being live streamed, we're speaking to a much bigger audience, and I really was very, very pleased to see how much public interest there is in the budget process. So that was really good as well. I wanted to put that on record. Secondly, as I said at the convention center, I will repeat it now, the budget is probably the most important thing in the annual parliamentary calendar. And I'm really very disappointed that the APNU AFC chose, first of all, to try to delay and stymie the budget consideration process, and ultimately chose to withdraw from this process. I want to say in the strongest possible terms that this is an extremely disappointing position that the APNU AFC adopted for many reasons. First of all, the budget has, is literally the amalgamation of government policy, projects, initiatives, etc. And detailed parliamentary consideration of the budget is very important. Like I said, subjecting the budget to scrutiny and analysis is essential to ensuring public understanding and parliamentary understanding of the budget. And it's really very, like I said, I'm really extremely disappointed that the APNU AFC chose to withdraw from the budget process. It's disappointing also from the point of view that, as I said earlier, I believe that they were in fact trying to frustrate, delay, and possibly even derail the approval of the budget, which is very disturbing, because the budget contains initiatives that are intended to improve people's lives and to contribute to development in the country. And any attempt to frustrate, delay, derail, or otherwise what's the right word? Frustrate, delay, abort the approval of the budget. Any attempt to do so really is an attempt to frustrate development and an attempt to frustrate the implementation of the initiatives that are contained in the budget. There are investments that are contained in the budget, public investment projects, roads, schools, investment in medical centers, investment in government services. All of these things are intended not only to deliver services to people, not only to deliver quality of life, but also to generate economic activity, to create jobs, to generate incomes. And to the extent that the APNU AFC sought to delay the approval of the budget, they were seeking, therefore, to delay the delivery of benefit to the people of Guyana. And I think that is extremely disappointing, and I want to place on record, as I did earlier today, my disappointment that they adopted this stance. Thirdly, and related to the second point, look, there's a lot that is extremely positive about Budget 2021. It has a number of very important initiatives, not just the direct measures, but the budget is all about literally investing in every sector, investing in physical infrastructure, roads, bridges, airstrips, delivery of health through the public healthcare system, delivery of quality education services, in the increases that we mentioned to various direct benefits, increase in old age pension, increase in public assistance, the various tax measures that we had announced. The budget is about all of these various elements. And I think Budget 2021 has a lot that is extremely positive for the economy. We're still grappling with the challenges of COVID-19, but the budget has a lot of initiatives that I think will help us to navigate COVID-19 hopefully safely, while keeping the economy afloat and restarting economic activity, which is what Budget 2020 initiated and what Budget 2021 seeks to build on. And so I really do think that Budget 2021 is an important step towards getting us back on our feet after a very challenging year in 2020, getting us back on our feet, resuming economic activity and putting us on a path, like the budget said, putting us on a path, first of all, to recovery, but to longer term economic dynamism, as the budget theme says, and making us a more resilient economy and a more resilient country, also as the budget theme said. So, having registered my disappointment that the APNU AFC chose to withdraw themselves from the process, I must also register my satisfaction that the budget was approved and that we can now proceed to implementation. Which brings me now to, I guess, my fourth and perhaps final major point, and that is that now that the budget is approved, our priority in government is to ensure that all of the various initiatives and projects that are proposed in the budget, that the various ministries and agencies proceed to implement those in the most timely manner possible. And so my message to the budget agencies, the various ministries and other agencies, would be that it is now time for us to proceed with implementation as swiftly as possible and as effectively as possible. And that would be, perhaps coming out of the budget process. I guess looking ahead now, I would want to urge all of the budget agencies to move swiftly now to start implementing the various initiatives and projects that are contained in the budget. In a sense, as we close the chapter on budget preparation and budget approval, we open a new chapter, which is budget implementation. And in that regard, one could quite safely say that the work really now begins. The work of implementing Budget 2021 and ensuring that the objectives of Budget 2021 are fully realized, that work really now begins, starting from today. And that would be the message that I would want to get out there to the budget agencies and my colleagues in the cabinet and the staff of the various ministries. So I wanted really just to share those messages with you. I don't know if you would like to, I'm open to taking questions. So yeah, Kristen?
The opposition would have accused government of not giving to the public servants, whereas even though a number of tax relief measures would have been implemented. But they're also asking about public servants in terms of increasing salaries. There was no scrutiny. We wouldn't know what the nitty-gritties of what would have been offered by the sector. So that's why I think
you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. The opposition, the APNU AFC, claimed to be so concerned about the allocations that were in there. But if they were genuine in their concern, then they would have stayed the course and scrutinized the estimates and asked the key questions at the appropriate agencies' consideration of the relevant agencies' budgets to address precisely those questions that you asked. So you're absolutely correct that in fact what has happened is the public has been denied an opportunity to get the benefit of detailed scrutiny of the estimates by the APNU AFC. So I'm glad that you asked that question. Those who would have heard my rebuttal speech on Monday would have heard me make a few points. In particular, I pointed out that it's a well-established practice that we don't announce the salary increase for the coming year in the budget speech. And I made the point that if you look at the 2016, 17, 18, and 19 budget speeches, the last 4 budget speeches of the APNU AFC government, if you look at all 4 of those budget speeches, none of those 4, 2016 to 2019, none of them announced the budget, announced the salary increase that was planned in the coming year, in the budget year. They reported on the historical increase that had been granted in the year preceding the budget. So if it's the 2019 budget, they had reported what was the salary increase that had been granted in 2018, but they didn't indicate what was the salary increase that was planned for 2019. And so this is a well-established practice, and anybody who's been around the public finances, in the Ministry of Finance, anybody who's been around the Parliament, serving in the Parliament, they know that this is a well-established practice. And so to stand and to say the budget doesn't have anything for public servants, frankly speaking, is a, if that, coming from anybody who is familiar with the way that the budgets are prepared, that we prepare budgets in Guyana, and not just PPPC governments, even APNU governments, anybody who's familiar with this process would know that we don't typically announce the salary increase for the coming year. And to do so really is, I think, mischievous. To make the accusation that there's nothing in the budget for public servants is nothing short of mischievous. What it tells me is that any such person who makes that accusation really couldn't find anything credible to criticize the budget for, so they latched on to something which is so easy to, they latched on to a manufactured criticism of the budget, and a manufactured criticism that has absolutely no basis in fact. As was pointed out by initially by the Vice President and then subsequently by many other speakers throughout the budget debate, there is an allocation in the budget, within the Ministry of Finance budget, in fact, which is where it always is, called Other Employment Costs, which provides in excess of 10 billion Guyana dollars, out of which is paid a variety of employment costs, expenditure related to employment costs, including salary adjustments, employment cost shortfalls that might arise in agencies, the cost of new recruits in agencies, and of course the cost of salary increase. And that allocation is there in the 2021 budget. There is such an allocation, and it is there, it's easy, it's there for everybody to see. And had the APNU AFC been interested in participating in this process to the end, they would have been welcome to ask questions on that allocation. So I can say definitively that there is an allocation in the budget to address public servants, salary increase to public servants in 2021.
For now, that's my question on the budget.
Very good, Chris. Yes, David.
Can you remind us of what is the expected annualized benefits that would accrue to Guyanese at large?
Sure. So in terms of the budget measures, I had made the point that first of all, you had a series of measures that had been announced in the 2020 budget, but of course, as you know, the 2020 budget came in September. So you only had literally a 3-month effect of the measures announced in budget 2020. So you first of all have to annualize those to get the full year effect. And then secondly, you have the further measures that were announced in budget 2021. Taken together, the 2020 and the 2021 budget measures, we anticipate will place in the hands of businesses and households of Guyana an additional $50 billion. Now, if you consider what that means, the potential that that has to stimulate and generate economic activity, if you consider what that means, and if you consider how that is going to multiply itself across the economy, you get a sense of how important it was to get the budget approved so that those benefits can accrue. And I've always made the point that it's a mistake, it would be a mistake to look at a measure only in terms of its direct impact. So you may have a measure, for example, let's say you may have a measure of paying the uniform vouchers to parents, or the assistance that we give to parents for school-age children, or you may have the increase that we gave to old age pensioners. You have the direct impact, which is the amount of money that is going to go in the hands of these people directly. But then you have the multiplier effects across the economy. So, for example, if you implement a measure that puts in the hands of people, say, directly in their hands, let's say $4 or $5 billion, which some of these measures will do, the vast majority of these people, once they receive that higher pension, once they receive that higher public assistance, once they receive that school voucher, what do they then do? They go to the markets, they go to the shops, and they spend that money. They buy things for their children, they buy things for their family, they buy food, they buy other items to consume. Some of them will save that money. They may invest it in something. They might buy an appliance for their home. They might contribute it to the mortgage payments that they're paying or the higher purchase payments that they're making. And then the people who they buy goods and services from, they in turn will spend that money on goods and services themselves. So let us say, another $4 billion is injected into disposable income of households who then go to the markets and shops. The markets and shops, the market stall holders and shop owners or proprietors, they in turn will go to the wholesalers. They in turn will buy more goods and services from the wholesalers. The wholesalers will then go to their suppliers. They in turn will be supplying more goods and services. And then it turns itself over so many times in the economy, which is really absolutely essential to sort of stimulating economic activity, stimulating economic growth, generating incomes, etc. So yes, the annualized impact of the budget measures is expected to be $50 billion. Like I said, we expect that a lot of these measures will contribute in a very significant way to stimulating economic activity. I mean, one of the things that I want to mention is, of course, take, for example, home ownership. There are few things more important than a person owning their own home. And we have a lot of funds provided for development of new housing areas. As you know, the Ministry of Housing is, just to give you a point of how comprehensive the budget is, not only do we provide resources for development of new housing areas and putting infrastructure in, but we also have measures that are designed to reduce the cost of borrowing. So, for example, raising of the ceiling on low-income housing loans, raising of the ceiling on the New Building Society mortgages, etc. All of those initiatives come together to contribute in a very significant way to people being better able to afford their own homes. And every additional person that constructs a home creates maybe another 5 to 10 jobs. If you think about it, for every person who gets a house lot, goes and take a low-income housing loan, they're then creating jobs themselves, construction jobs. If you think about the carpenters, the masons, the painters, the plumbers, the people who do the transportation to bring the construction materials, you're generating economic activity, and if you're developing 10,000 house lots every year, and those people are going to go and build their homes, think about the number of jobs that you're creating, and so I think on the one hand, I'm disappointed that at the position that the APNU AFC took, but on the other hand, I welcome the passage of Budget 2021 and I look forward to its timely implementation. Very good. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Sure. Fiasco would have been unlawful and so forth. You said it was a premature announcement by the bank.
Yeah, well, I didn't exactly say unlawful. But what I said was that I did say it was premature. I think I said premature and unfortunate, or premature and inappropriate. Definitely premature and unfortunate. Mainly because the sale of banking operations requires a regulatory process. And I pointed out yesterday that the Financial Institutions Act requires any such transaction to be subject to review, due diligence, and approval by the central bank, and that process has not even started as yet. And so it is my view, and it is the view of government, that it is that making an announcement of that nature, could potentially send a signal that this transaction is about to happen, when in fact it is still subject to regulatory consideration and approval. So that was really the point that I was making.
Because it's worrisome to me that Trinidad would be, if the sale ever goes through, would be owning a huge portion of Ghana's banking sector.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to get into I don't want to preempt the regulatory process that has to be executed. So I wouldn't. I mean, I don't. At this stage, I wouldn't want to, comment necessarily on, the suitability of the transaction as such. I mean, there are a number of considerations that would be, taken on board in reviewing any application for sale of the bank's operations, and I don't want to preempt those considerations. My main concern was that an announcement was made before the regulatory process was conducted. Very good. Thank you very much. Thanks, Kristen.